Welcome, story lovers. I'm your regular horror storyteller, here to help you drift into a peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it,
and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there.
If you are scared, please don't listen, and if you think you are brave enough, I dare you to listen to the end.
The first time I saw my face looking back at me from between the trees, I was standing on my porch with a cup of coffee, and the thing wearing my face was standing perfectly still in the exact same position 70 feet away. Same posture, same hand, holding an identical cup that couldn't possibly exist. When I shifted my weight to my left foot, it shifted a half second later. When I lowered the cup, it lowered its cup. When I stepped backward into my house and locked the door, I watched through the window as it stepped backward into the trees and disappeared into darkness that shouldn't have been that dark at 9 in the morning. That was 3 months into living in my grandfather's house at the edge of the Pisgah Forest in North Carolina. And by then, I had already learned that the woods don't follow the rules we pretend govern the world. But I hadn't yet understood that the thing in those woods was learning me the way a student learns a language, practicing my movements and voice and habits until it could speak me fluently. I need to go back further though, because the first sign wasn't the mimicry, it was the trails. When I moved into the house after my grandfather died, I spent the first week clearing out his belongings and getting reacquainted with land I'd roamed as a child. He'd owned 40 acres backing up to National Forest, and as a kid, I'd explored every inch, built forts in the laurel thickets, caught crawfish in the creek that marked the southern boundary. I remembered the main trail that ran from the back porch to the creek, a 10-minute walk through mixed hardwoods and rhododendron. That first week back, I decided to walk it again. I set a timer on my phone out of curiosity. 4 minutes. The trail that used to take 10 minutes now took 4. I stood at the creek staring at my phone, then turned and walked back, counting my steps this time. 347 steps from porch to creek. I found my old trail journal in a box that evening, a little notebook where I'd recorded stupid kid observations. June 2001, age 11, I'd written, porch to creek, 892 steps, legs tired. I went out the next morning and counted again, measuring carefully, heel to toe at certain points to make sure I wasn't taking longer strides. 340. I measured the distance with a rangefinder I found in my grandfather's shed, 412 feet. Unless I'd somehow had a 3-foot stride as an 11-year-old child, something was wrong with the distance, or something had changed it. That night I heard the first knock. I was lying in bed reading when 3 soft knocks came from the wall behind my headboard. Not the exterior wall, the interior wall, the one that backed onto the hallway. I got up and checked. Empty hallway. I went outside with a flashlight and walked the perimeter of the house. No branches close enough to touch the siding. No animals. No explanation. I convinced myself it was the house settling, old wood adjusting to temperature changes. The knocks came again the next night at the same time, 2:14 a.m., I noticed when I checked my phone. Same wall, 3 knocks, evenly spaced, soft but deliberate. This time I stayed in bed and listened. After about 30 seconds, 3 more knocks came from the opposite wall, then from the wall to my left, then from above in the ceiling. They were circling the room. I pulled the blanket up to my chin like a child and did not move and did not make a sound, and after the knocks completed their circuit, the house went silent in a way that felt like held breath. In the morning I walked the trail again and counted. 331 steps, 40 feet shorter than the day before. That was when I started keeping detailed records. I bought a surveyor's wheel and measured the distance from porch to creek precisely, 401 feet. I documented it with photos, timestamps, GPS coordinates. The next day, 392 feet. The day after, 386. The woods were contracting, pulling the creek closer to the house at a rate of about 6 to 8 feet per day, and there was no rational explanation for how a creek could move through landscape like that. How trees could shift position, how distance could compress. I drove into town and went to the library, looking through old property surveys and maps. Every document showed the creek in the same position, roughly 1,800 feet from the house. I pulled up satellite imagery on my laptop. The creek appeared exactly where it should be. But when I walked out there with the surveyor's wheel, it was 379 feet away. I mentioned it casually to the cashier at the grocery store. an older woman named Ruth who'd known my grandfather. "Trails feeling shorter?" she asked before I'd finished explaining. I nodded. She bagged my groceries in silence for a moment, then said quietly, "Don't go out after it gets dark, and don't never go out at 2:14. "Why 2:14? I asked. She handed me the bags and wouldn't meet my eyes. "Because that's when it's closest." I wanted to ask what it was, but she'd already turned to the next customer, and something in her posture told me the conversation was over. That evening, I researched the area's history. The Pisgah Forest was old, protected land, but before that it had been Cherokee territory, and before that, the stories got vague. I found references to the bottomless pools, sinkholes scattered through the mountains that were said to have no floor, places where people threw things they wanted to disappear. I found folklore about the Nunahi, spirit people who lived in the mountains and could appear as anyone they chose. I found a 1923 newspaper article about a surveying team that went missing for 3 days and came back refusing to speak about what they'd seen, all 5 men eventually leaving the state. But nothing explained distance changing or houses being circled by knocks in the night. The knocking continued every night at 2:14 a.m., always 3 knocks, always moving in a pattern. After a week, I started noticing it was circling faster. The first night it had taken about 2 minutes to complete the circuit around my room. Now it took 45 seconds, and the knocks were louder. I began sleeping with a flashlight and a hammer within reach, though I couldn't articulate what I thought I'd do with a hammer against something that could fold space and knock from inside walls. 2 weeks after I'd started measuring, the creek was 218 feet from the porch. I stood at the water's edge and looked back at the house. It appeared too far away. Perspective stretched wrong, like looking through a lens that distorted dimension. The trees between me and the house seemed taller than they should be, pressed closer together. When I walked back, I counted 218 steps exactly, but it felt like I'd walked much farther, like each step was covering more ground than it should. That night, the knocking came at 2:14 as usual, but this time it was accompanied by footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that started at the tree line and approached the house. I went to the window and looked out. Nothing visible, but I could hear them clearly, crunching through leaves, snapping small branches. They stopped directly below my window. The knocking came from right beside my head, from the exterior wall this time, just on the other side of the glass. 3 knocks. I stumbled backward and my legs hit the bed. The knocking came again, same spot. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it at the window. Empty night. Dark trees. But the glass was fogged with condensation on the outside, and in the fog at eye level there was a handprint. I've never gotten dressed faster in my life. I spent the rest of that night in my truck in the driveway, with the doors locked and the engine running, watching the house. Around 4 a.m., I saw movement in the window of my bedroom. Just a shadow passing across the glass from inside. I hadn't left any lights on. The sun came up and I went inside and checked every room. Nothing disturbed, no signs of entry. But on the fogged bathroom mirror, written in what looked like a finger dragged through condensation, were the words, "How many steps today?" I took a photo, then wiped it away with shaking hands. I measured the distance to the creek again that morning, 194 feet. I couldn't stay, that much was clear. But something stubborn in me refused to be driven out of my own house by something I couldn't even properly identify. My grandfather had lived here for 40 years. He must have known. I went through his belongings more carefully, looking for anything that might be a clue. In a locked drawer of his desk, I found a journal. The entries were sporadic, dated across decades. Most were mundane observations about weather and wildlife, but interspersed were other notes. March 4th, 1987, counted 891 steps today, holding steady. June 12th, 1989, down to 640, built the cairn at the halfway point as a marker. October 30th, 1995, 507 steps. The knocking has started again. I'd hoped feeding it would stop that. Feeding it. I paged forward frantically. November 8th, 1995, left the deer carcass at the creek bend. Gone by morning. Knocking stopped. Steps back to 890. My hands were trembling. My grandfather had been managing this, maintaining some kind of boundary through sacrifice. I kept reading. The entries grew more disturbed. April the 3rd, 2003. It spoke today, used my voice, called my name from the trees. I did not answer. April 10th, 2003, saw it. Looked like me but wrong. Eyes too steady. Smiled too long. Walked back into the forest, walking backward. September 15th, 2008. The steps are down to 401. Nothing I leave satisfies it anymore. It wants something else, but I don't know what. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before he died. It's not hunting, it's courting, trying to get close enough to replace me. I think I've been keeping it fed enough to stay slow, but I'm tired now. Whoever comes next needs to know. Don't let it learn you. Don't let it see you enough to copy you. And never, ever let it get close enough to touch you. Because that's when it stops being outside and starts being you. I closed the journal and sat in the growing dark of his study, understanding now why he'd left me the house. Not as a gift, as a burden, as a responsibility. The knocking came early that night at 11:47 p.m., no longer waiting for 2:14. It was loud enough to rattle the windows, circling the house in a frenzy. I sat in the living room with every light on and the journal open on my lap, trying to think. Feeding it had worked for my grandfather, at least for a while. But what did it actually want? The knocking stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, I heard my own voice outside calling my name. "Come out," it said, using my exact inflection. "Come out. We need to talk." I gripped the arms of the chair and said nothing. "I know you're scared," my voice continued from the darkness beyond the windows. "I'm scared too. We should talk about this face to face." The words were right, but the rhythm was wrong, just slightly off, like someone reciting memorized lines. "Please," my voice said, and now it was coming from multiple directions, surrounding the house. "Please come out. I just want to see you. I've been so alone out here." I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe slowly. It was trying to bait me, trying to establish contact. My grandfather's warning echoed, "Don't let it learn you." But it had already learned so much. My voice, my face, apparently. How much of me did it have already? The voices stopped. For several minutes, nothing. Then a soft sound at the front door. Not knocking, scratching, like fingernails dragging slowly down the wood. I got up quietly and moved to the kitchen away from the door. The scratching followed, moving along the wall, tracking me. It knew where I was. I went to the back door and looked out the window toward the woods. The forest was darker than it should be, the spaces between trees filled with a blackness that seemed solid, impenetrable. And standing at the tree line, barely visible, was a figure with my build and my posture. As I watched, it raised one hand and waved slowly. I stepped back from the window. When I looked again, the figure was gone, but I could see shapes moving in the darkness. Multiple shapes, all man-sized, walking between the trees in formation. The scratching on the walls intensified, coming from all sides now, dozens of fingernails scraping wood and glass simultaneously. I grabbed my phone and called Ruth from the grocery store. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "It's happening," I said. "I know," she replied. "I can hear it from here. You're 4 miles away and I can hear it. What do I do?" "What did your grandfather do?" "He fed it," I said, "deer, animals." "That won't work anymore," Ruth said quietly. "It's past that stage. It doesn't want food now." "Then what does it want?" She was quiet for a long moment. "It wants in. It's been circling that property for longer than your grandfather was alive, trying to find a way through. The land there is thin, the boundary between here and where it comes from. Your grandfather kept it at bay by maintaining the distance, keeping the creek far enough away. But now it's learned patience, it's learned to compress space, and it's learned you. How do I stop it?" "You don't," she said. "You either leave or you become what your grandfather was, a warden, someone who stays and maintains the boundary, someone who feeds it enough to keep it slow, but not enough to make it strong. And if I leave, then it finds someone else or it doesn't, and it crosses over anyway without anyone watching." The scratching stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. I looked out the kitchen window and saw them standing in a line at the tree line. 7 figures, all with my shape, all standing perfectly still, facing the house. "Ruth," I whispered. It made more of me. "How many?" I counted again to be sure. 7. She let out a shaky breath. It's testing patterns, trying to figure out which copy is accurate. Don't look at them too long. Don't try to figure out which is the real one, because they're all real enough. One of the figures began walking toward the house, then another. Then all 7, moving in perfect synchronization, same stride, same pace. "I have to go," I said. "Lock everything," Ruth said. "Don't open anything. Don't respond to anything. Wait for sunrise. It's weaker in direct light." She hung up. The figures were halfway across the clearing now. I ran through the house, checking locks, closing curtains, turning off lights so they couldn't see in. I ended up in the bathroom at the center of the house, the only room with no exterior windows, sitting in the bathtub with a blanket and the hammer and my phone. I could hear them reach the house. Footsteps on the porch, slow and measured. They walked the perimeter, and I counted 7 distinct sets of footsteps, never overlapping, perfectly coordinated. Then they stopped. For a long time, nothing. I checked my phone. 2:14 a.m. The knocking came softly. 3 knocks on the bathroom door from the hallway side. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. 3 more knocks, slightly louder. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend I was somewhere else. Then I heard the doorknob turn slowly. I watched it rotate, metal catching the faint light from my phone screen. The door was locked. The knob turned fully, stopped, turned back. A long pause, then my own voice, muffled through the door. "I know you're in there." I pressed myself against the back of the tub. "Please," the voice said, "I'm hurt, I need help, please open the door." It was perfect. The exact tone I'd use if I were injured and frightened. The slight catch in the breath, the desperation. If I heard that voice calling from outside myself, I would open the door without question. "Please," it said again, "there's something out here. Something that looks like me. I'm scared, please." I wanted to respond, wanted to say something, if only to end the terrible tension of silence. But I remembered my grandfather's words. "Don't let it learn you." Every response was data, every word was practice. The doorknob stopped turning. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. I heard the front door open, though I knew I'd locked it. Heard it close again, heard nothing. I stayed in the bathtub until my phone showed 6:47 a.m. and grey light started filtering under the bathroom door. I emerged slowly, every muscle cramped. The house was undisturbed. Doors still locked from the inside. No signs of entry. I went to the front window and looked out. The 7 figures were gone. But in the clearing between the house and the tree line, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 piles of leaves and sticks. Each pile was shaped roughly like a human form. Each one had a rock placed where the head would be. I measured the distance to the creek that morning, 93 feet. That was the day I decided to try my grandfather's method. I drove into town and bought a hunting license, then spent the afternoon in the national forest away from my property. By evening, I'd killed a deer, a young doe. I field dressed it and loaded it into my truck, trying not to think too hard about what I was doing. At dusk, I dragged the carcass to the creek and left it on the bank. I went back to the house and waited. At 2:14 a.m., I heard splashing from the direction of the creek. Heavy movement through water. I didn't go to investigate. In the morning, the deer was gone. Not dragged away, gone. No blood trail, no tracks. Just an empty space where I'd left it, and the grass pressed flat in a wide circle around that space. I measured the distance to the creek, 93 feet. It hadn't changed. For 3 days, the distance held steady. The knocking didn't come. The woods were quiet. I began to hope that I'd found the solution, that I could maintain the boundary the way my grandfather had. On the 4th day, I found a deer carcass on my porch. The same doe I'd killed, I was certain of it. Same size, same marking on the ear, returned, rejected. That night, the knocking came back, louder than ever. And when I looked out the window at 2:14, there were 14 figures standing at the tree line. It had doubled itself. I called Ruth in panic. "It gave it back," I said. "The deer. It returned it." "Then it doesn't want that anymore," she said, and her voice carried a resignation that frightened me more than anything else had. "What does it want?" I did know. I'd known since reading my grandfather's journal. It wanted what it had always wanted, to cross over, to replace, to become. "There has to be another way," I said. "Maybe," Ruth said. But I don't know it. Your grandfather searched for 40 years. I hung up and sat in the dark living room thinking. The distance to the creek was back to 93 feet and would start shrinking again now that the offering had been rejected. The thing in the woods had learned my voice, my face, my movements. It had multiplied itself into a crowd of me. It was practicing, refining, getting ready. I thought about my grandfather's last entry. It's courting, trying to get close enough to replace me. What if the solution wasn't to keep it out, but to understand what it actually was? What if it wasn't malicious, just desperate? Something trapped on one side of a boundary, trying desperately to cross over, to exist in a world it could only observe from a distance? The next morning I did something my grandfather's journal never mentioned him doing. I walked to the creek at dawn and I spoke to the forest. "I know you can hear me," I said. "I know you're listening. I want to understand." The woods were silent. I sat down on the bank and waited. After an hour, I heard movement in the trees behind me. I didn't turn around. "My grandfather kept you away for 40 years, I said. "But I don't think you're a threat. I think you're something else." Footsteps approached slowly. I felt every instinct screaming at me to run, but I stayed seated looking at the water. "I think you're trapped," I continued. "I think this place is a threshold, and you're trying to cross it. I think you've been trying for a very long time." The footsteps stopped directly behind me. I could feel presence, weight, the sense of something standing close enough to touch. "I'm not going to run," I said. "I'm not going to fight, I just want to understand." A voice spoke, and it was mine, but layered with something else underneath, something that resonated wrong, like a chord with too many notes. "Understand what?" it asked. I took a slow breath. "What you need to cross over, what you actually need." Silence stretched. Then, permission. I turned around. There were 3 of me standing there, spaced a few feet apart. They were identical, perfect copies, but their eyes were wrong. Not the color or shape, but the way they focused, too steady, unblinking. "Permission from who?" I asked. All 3 spoke in unison. "From what we're replacing." The words settled over me like cold water. "You can't just cross," I said slowly, working it out. "You need someone to let you." They nodded together. "The boundary requires exchange. Something leaves, something enters. Your grandfather understood. He kept us distant by refusing exchange, but distance is relative. We've been learning to compress it. We're close now, close enough." "Close enough for what?" "To ask properly," they said. One of them extended a hand toward me. "Let us cross. Step aside. We'll take your place and you'll be free to go anywhere, be anyone. The boundary opens both ways." I stared at the offered hand. "What happens to me?" "You become what we are, waiting, watching, learning the next person who comes." "I become you," I said, "trapped on the other side." "Not trapped," they said, "patient." I stood up slowly, and all 3 of them tracked the movement with that too steady gaze. My grandfather had refused this offer for 40 years, had maintained the boundary through sacrifice and distance and sheer stubborn will. But he'd also grown old and tired, and in the end, he'd left the problem to me. I thought about Ruth's words, "You either leave, or you become a warden." But there was a third option, exchange. "No," I said. The 3 figures tilted their heads in perfect synchronization. "No. I'm not giving you permission. I'm not making that exchange." "Then we continue," they said simply. "We compress the distance until the boundary fails. It will take time, but we have time. We've always had time." "How long?" I asked. They smiled, and it was wrong. The expression held too long. "Your grandfather delayed us 40 years. You might manage 30. Eventually the boundary will thin enough that permission isn't required. We'll simply step through, and whoever we've learned most thoroughly will be what we become. Currently, that's you." They began walking backward, maintaining eye contact, retreating into the trees. "We'll keep practicing," they said. "We'll keep learning, and when the boundary fails, we'll be ready." They disappeared into the shadows. I measured the distance that afternoon. 86 feet. Shrinking again. That was 4 months ago. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know what's happening here, need some record to exist beyond my grandfather's journal hidden in a locked drawer. The creek is currently 42 feet from the porch. I measure it every morning and watch the number drop. The knocking comes every night at 2:14, circling faster and faster. Last week I counted 37 figures at the tree line, all wearing my face. They're getting better at it. The expressions are more natural now, the movements less synchronized, harder to tell them apart from the real thing. I've started wondering if I'm still the real thing. Sometimes I catch myself standing at the tree line at dusk, with no memory of walking there. Sometimes I speak, and my voice sounds layered, too resonant. Sometimes I find myself in the woods at 2:14 a.m., with my hands pressed against the bark of trees, feeling them compress under my palms. Yesterday I walked to the creek and counted my steps. 42. When I turned to walk back, I counted 42 steps again, but I ended up deeper in the woods instead of at the house. The distance is becoming negotiable, flexible. I'm learning to compress it the way they have, or they're learning to extend it. I can't tell anymore which of us is doing the teaching. Ruth stopped answering her phone. When I drove past her house, it was empty, a for sale sign in the yard. I'm the only one left who knows. The boundary is failing. I can feel it in the way the air moves, in the way shadows fall wrong, in the way my reflection in the bathroom mirror sometimes keeps moving after I've stopped. My grandfather lasted 40 years. I don't think I'll make it 4 more months. The distance is down to 42 feet and dropping by 3 to 4 feet per day now. At that rate, the creek will reach the porch by early next week. I don't know what happens when the distance reaches 0, but I suspect that's when the boundary fails completely, when permission stops being necessary. I think that's when they cross, or when I do. I'm not sure which side of the boundary I'm on anymore. Last night I woke up at 2:14 to find myself standing in my bedroom, looking down at myself sleeping in the bed. I was in 2 places simultaneously. I was the one sleeping and the one watching. I raised my hand and my sleeping self raised a hand at the same instant. I smiled and my sleeping self smiled back. We were learning each other, becoming each other, the boundary between us thinning like the boundary between the woods and the world. This morning I measured the distance, 39 feet. Tonight I'll measure it again, and tomorrow and the day after. I'll keep measuring until there's nothing left to measure, until the creek touches the porch and the woods press against the walls, and the distance becomes 0 and the exchange completes. I don't know who will wake up when that happens. I don't know which version of me will walk away from this house, but I know the woods are patient, and I know they're learning, and I know that somewhere in the trees right now there are dozens of me standing perfectly still, practicing breathing, practicing blinking, practicing being human enough to cross over when the time comes. If you're reading this, if you've found this account somehow, I need you to understand something important. The boundary isn't just here. It's not just this property in North Carolina. My grandfather's journal mentioned other places, thin places, thresholds where something waits and watches and learns. If you've ever felt followed in the woods, if you've ever heard your voice echo back wrong, if you've ever measured a familiar distance and found it changed, if you've ever seen yourself standing where you shouldn't be, then you're near a boundary, and something on the other side is learning you. Don't give it permission, don't make the exchange, don't let it close the distance, because once the boundary fails, you won't know which side you're on anymore. You won't know if you're the one who stayed or the one who crossed, and by the time you realize, it won't matter. I'm going to measure the distance again now. It's getting dark and 2:14 is coming, and I can hear them gathering at the tree line. All of them, all of me, waiting patiently for the numbers to reach 0, 39 feet, and dropping. Soon,